And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Oh, yes. Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. It's nearly the weekend. We're nearly there. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Patrick Christie's, on your TV, radio and online this morning with you all the way through until midday with an action-packed show. Really good one, this. I'm bang up for it this morning, ladies and gentlemen, but make sure that you get in touch with your views as usual. GBviews at gbnews.uk. We'll be getting to those throughout the show, but first, it's time for your latest headlines.
Thank you, Patrick. Good morning. It's 1 minute past 10. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. The Foreign Secretary will address the death sentences given to 2 British men when she speaks to her Ukrainian counterpart later today. Aidan Aslin and Sean Penner were found guilty of mercenary activities by a court in the pro-Russian region of Donetsk. Liz Truss described the verdict as a sham judgment with no legitimacy and says she'll do everything to support the men. In Ukraine, Aidan's friend and fighter Brennan Phillips told GB News the West needs to close the country's airspace to Russia.
That is what they use to dictate the tempo and of the combat operations on the ground. And the only reason they've been able to make advances, a decisive Ukrainian victory is the best means to securing their release, and will give the UK and the Ukrainian government leverage to negotiate the terms of their release.
5 men in a bid to block a deportation flight to Rwanda is being heard in the High Court. Lawyers representing more than 90 people have submitted a legal challenge against the government's policy to send asylum seekers to the African nation. The first flight is due to leave next Tuesday. Lawyers argue the policy is unlawful. They're seeking to stop all flights until a full hearing can be heard later this year. 5 men have been arrested on suspicion of the murder of a football fan. Simon Dobbin was left with permanent brain damage after being attacked on his way home from a match in Southend in 2015. He died 5 years later, aged 48. Police say medical tests showed a direct link between his death and the injuries he sustained. A Foreign Office minister has met the Brazilian chief of police to discuss the disappearance of a British journalist in the Amazon. Dom Phillips and a local Indigenous expert, Bruno Araújo Pereira, vanished from a remote part of the rainforest earlier this week. Police are investigating whether their disappearance is linked to illegal fishing. Traces of blood found on a boat are being tested to see whether it's human. MPs have criticised the government's plan to burn £4 billion worth of unusable personal protective equipment. The Department of Health and Social Care has been accused of wasting 75% of the £12 billion it spent on PPE during the first year of the pandemic. The government's being urged to clarify its plans for the unusable equipment, including expected costs to the Treasury and to the environment. 14,000 new school places will be created as part of the government's levelling up plans. Up to 75 new free schools and sixth forms will open in 55 areas identified as needing education investment. The first is expected to open in September 2025. School Standards Minister Robin Walker told GB News that supporting younger generations is a priority.
We need to be levelling up across the country, and that's why I think the targeting of the support for schools that I'm announcing today is really important. We've got these 55 education investment areas. We want to prioritise those for new schools, so that actually areas where perhaps children haven't had the opportunity to progress post-16 previously can have that gap filled. Have that opportunity to go as far as they can in their education and perhaps to go on to university, perhaps to take our new T-levels so that they can have the best chances in the workplace.
In the US, a police officer who suffered a brain injury during last year's Capitol Hill riot has described the violence as a war scene. The officers given evidence in the first of 6 congressional hearings into the attack. New CCTV and police body cam footage has been released showing thousands of Trump supporters attacking police and smashing windows in January last year. Police officer Caroline Edwards told the hearing she wasn't trained for the chaos and hours of hand-to-hand combat.
What I saw was just a war scene. It was something like I'd seen out of the movies. I couldn't believe my eyes. There were officers on the ground, they were bleeding, they were throwing up, they had, I saw friends with blood all over their faces. I was slipping in people's blood.
And the discovery of a shipwrecked royal warship has been hailed the most important maritime find since the Mary Rose. HMS Gloucester sank in 1682 while carrying the future King of England, King James II. The shipwreck was discovered by 2 brothers off the coast of Norfolk back in 2007 following a 4-year search, but has only just been revealed due to security reasons. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now, though, it's back to Patrick with To The Point.
A very good morning, everybody. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Patrick Christys, and I am live all the way through until midday with an action-packed show for you to kickstart your day and hopefully drag us kicking and screaming eventually into the weekend. Right, so 2 British soldiers who were captured by Russian forces in occupied Ukraine have been found guilty and actually sentenced to death in what Foreign Secretary Liz Truss calls a sham justice with absolutely no legitimacy. Our national reporter, Paul Hawkins, will bring us more on that. Very concerning stuff, isn't it? Meanwhile, chaos in America's first families as Ivanka Trump, don't say that wrong, who gets that, is recorded saying she doesn't agree with her father, Donald, that there was voter fraud in the 2020 presidential election as the hearing over the Capitol riots continues. Meanwhile, Joe Biden's troubled son Hunter is portrayed as a womanising, drug-binging fraudster in his ex-wife's new memoir. We take a look at the politics happening over the pond a bit later on. And finally, for today's controversy, we look at the UK's obesity crisis. I can relate to that, of course. Researchers say that calling someone morbidly obese is offensive and should be banned, and calling failed diets failures apparently is insensitive. I'll be joined by a TV star with quite a few thoughts on that matter very, very soon. I've got all of that coming up and much, much more across the programme. Get in touch with your views as well, gbviews@gbnews.uk. But first, I want to talk to you about the film Lady of Heaven and, frankly, not giving in to mob rule. We need to stop giving in to mob rule. We need to stop worrying about offending a particularly hard-line element of the Muslim community, put our foot down and say enough is enough. There have been huge protests outside of Cineworld in Bradford, Bolton, Birmingham and Sheffield by some Muslim, mostly from what I can see anyway, men. Why? Because there was a film called The Lady of Heaven that is about the Prophet Muhammad's daughter, apparently. I've not seen it, obviously, but it depicts her and apparently the Prophet Muhammad as well. The film has now been pulled because Cineworld was afraid that these protests were threatening the safety of their staff. Well, why didn't the police get involved then? If this was a far-right mob, then the police would be all over it, wouldn't they? They'd stop it. Look, I'm all for tolerance and inclusivity, but at the end of the day, if you live in a certain country, you should adopt the values of that country, not attempt to force your values onto everyone else, in my opinion. Britain is a very diverse nation, wonderfully so. In fact, multiculturalism, frankly, some people would argue, puts the great into Great Britain, doesn't it? We are a very multicultural country with a large Muslim population. But it is not a Muslim country, and that's simply a straightforward matter of fact. If a cinema chain chooses to show a film that offends the sensitivities of some elements, anyway, of the Muslim community, then as far as I'm concerned, there's a very simple solution for the protesters outside the cinemas. Just don't watch the film. But this is just the latest in a very long line of similar incidents. Take Batley Grammar School, for example. Yet again, a mob conducted pretty threatening protests. Nothing really happened about it, and now a teacher is, as far as I'm aware, essentially in protective custody for the rest of his life. This is not on. It's not OK. We have to grow a pair and put our foot down. We're too soft when it comes to this kind of stuff. People might think, oh, well, it's just a film. Take the easy route and cancel it. It's just one teacher at a school. It doesn't really matter. But where does this end when you really play it out? I actually find it quite offensive that there appears to be a rather large group of people who are more than happy to reap the benefits that this country has to offer, so by our way of life, for example. Talking of benefits, by the way, actually, has anyone asked why this lot protesting outside cinemas aren't actually at work? No? OK, fine. Anyway, people seem more than happy to take advantage of our free education system, our free healthcare system and other general benefits that this country has to offer. But then at the same time, they want to fundamentally impose their values or cultural or religious ideology onto all of us. And I find that more than a bit cheeky. Frankly, I find it flipping rude. Yeah, we'll get those views coming in, people. GBviews at gbnews.uk. I want to hear from you on that. Before I came on air, I was having a look at the inbox, actually, and already people, before I even spoke about it, people are not happy about what's taking place outside various Cineworld cinemas. There's calls now even for the View cinemas, apparently, to cancel this film. How do you feel about it? Anyway, get in touch, gbviews at gbnews.uk. But moving on from that for just a moment. 2 British men and a Moroccan man captured by Russian forces in Ukraine have been found guilty of terrorist offences and sentenced to death in what Liz Truss calls a sham judgment. Well, our national reporter Paul Hawkins has this report for us.
28-year-old Aidan Aslin from Nottinghamshire on the left and 48-year-old Sean Pinner from Bedfordshire on the right.
Aslin Aidan.
Along with the Moroccan man, all 3 sentenced to death by this court in Donetsk, a part of Ukraine occupied by Russian forces that is not internationally recognised. The charges read to them being foreign mercenaries, trying to seize power and terrorist offences. And this is where they were captured by the Russians, fighting for the Ukrainian army in Mariupol. Their families say as serving soldiers they're prisoners of war and therefore are protected by the Geneva Convention. Ukraine's former president is Petro Poroshenko.
This is the barbarian face of Russia. This is just a strong message which the whole world should send to Russia, that Russia has a zero jurisdiction on this territory.
Aidan Aslin is a former care worker who moved to Ukraine in 2018. The same year, he got engaged to a Ukrainian woman and joined the country's military. He'd previously fought with the Kurds in Syria against so-called Islamic State. Sean Pinner, meanwhile, is a former British soldier who moved to Ukraine 4 years ago, also marrying a Ukrainian woman and using his experience to train the country's military. His family say his 3-year contract was due to expire at the end of the year and he was planning to take up humanitarian work. Jason Fajulich spoke to us in April. He fought with both men in Syria.
I believe in the beginning they said if they found any foreign fighters that they would just treat them as terrorists, which unfortunately we know for Russia is execution on the spot. So we're lucky that these 2 are still alive. In fact, their social media presence has probably helped keep them alive. But as we see now, they are being used as a Russian mouthpiece for their propaganda.
The Foreign Secretary Liz Truss has called it a sham judgment with absolutely no legitimacy. The British government has confirmed it's liaising with its Ukrainian counterpart to try and secure the men's release. And this man seen here with Vladimir Putin could be the key. Viktor Medvedchuk is a pro-Russian Ukrainian politician currently held on charges of high treason. Moscow has already suggested swapping him for the 2 British nationals.
Boris Johnson really does care, like he says he does, about British citizens. And he would help pressure Zelensky to do the right thing and return Viktor to his family and return us to our families.
The 2 Britons will appeal the sentencing, their fate now in the hands of diplomacy. Paul Hawkins, GB News.
Yes, morning, everybody. Thank you for that, Paul. So Russian and Eurasian affairs analyst Dr. Anna Matvieva joins me now in the studio, actually, and human rights campaigner and director of Peter Tatchell Foundation, Peter Tatchell. Very appropriate, actually, really. Joins us down the line. Thank you very much, both of you. So I'll start with you, Anna. What do you make of this, then, really? Because a lot of people are saying this is an absolute outrage.
Well, first, participation in a foreign war out of your own volition and rather than on the orders of your own state is a risky business. So one of the outcomes would be that you can be killed, one of that you can be wounded, or you can be captured and put on trial. So that was not something which was factored in by these individuals when they decided to participate in this military action. And it is quite clear that in the legislation in this country, it's not something which was supposed to happen. Secondly, from the Russian point of view, certainly they would want now to make it as uncomfortable for the British government as possible. And what they would want to do for the British government to put pressure on their nationals in Ukraine, because a few hundred of them are fighting still on the front lines or not, and to make these people return, not to have that kind of difficult diplomatic situation in future. That's the outcome.
OK, Peter, I will throw it over to you. You obviously heard what Anna had to say there. What's your take on it?
Well, very clearly, these men are not mercenaries. They were signed in as members of the Ukrainian military, so they have the full protection of the Geneva Conventions, which means that unless they have committed war crimes, they cannot be charged and sentenced. Now, there's no evidence that we've heard of that either of these men have committed any war crime. They have not killed civilians. They have not attacked civilian targets like hospitals or churches or other places, protected places under the Geneva Convention. So the charges have no substance. And it's very clear that Russia is using their case in a bid to put pressure on Western authorities, firstly to try and get a prisoner exchange, and secondly to try and pressure all those existing foreign fighters who are enlisted in the military in Ukraine to get them to withdraw out of fear that they too could face capture and execution.
Yeah, I mean, Anna, obviously there's been massive accusations. I mean, well, it's not accusations. There have been war crimes committed in Ukraine, certainly from what I can see anyway. And sentencing people to death does nothing to help the notion that actually, I suppose, Russia or the Russian government or their forces are essentially very backward.
Well, first, we have to say that it is not a Russian court, and the caption which is now displayed is not quite right. It is Donetsk People's Republic. We can say that it's completely illegitimate, that it's a Russian proxy, but it is still a separate entity, and in their law, death penalty exists, which does not really exist in Russia. So that's kind of one point. The other thing that certainly it's a bargaining chip. Certainly, there is something which is supposed to be done in exchange for a serious concession for Britain. The fact that it are British fighters is especially important because now relationship between Britain and Russia.
Sorry, just quickly, what do you think they want? Do you think they want us to pay money to release them or something? Is that when you say bargaining chip? Is that what we mean?
Yeah, they want the British.
Because ISIS do that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, they want British nationals fighting in Ukraine to withdraw and go back to Britain or to third countries, because we know that there are several hundred Britons fighting, and then they want these people to withdraw. That's one thing. Then they also want the British government to issue some kind of appeal to the Donetsk People's Republic Authority to recognize, of course, not their legitimacy, but at least acknowledge their existence. So they want to have a bit of a symbolic gesture from Britain. OK,
Peter, I'll throw it back over to you, my good man. Look, some people would say, I mean, war is a very messy business, OK, and we can have rules and this, that and the other, but frankly, you know, once the shells start dropping, you know, there aren't really that many rules, are there? And I suppose in war, sometimes, unfortunately, people die. This lot have been captured, sentenced to death. Is that part and parcel?
Well, it's very clear under the Geneva Conventions, which Russia has signed up to, that soldiers captured in war should be treated humanely, that they should not be executed either on the spot summarily or subsequently by courts, unless there is very clear evidence that they have committed some particular heinous crime under the Geneva Conventions. But even then, the death penalty is not an appropriate kind of penalty for anything but the most grave and serious crimes. So, you know, Nazi leaders were sentenced to death at Nuremberg, but this was for complicity in the killing of millions of people, neither of which these men have done.
OK, good. I can see you're itching to get involved, Anna. Go on.
Yes, I don't think that we're actually going to see the sentence being implemented. I do not think that it's going to be executed because in the end, Russia wants more people to surrender, and if they will be facing imminent death, they are not going to surrender. Okay. So there will be some kind of a trade-off.
Dr. Anna McViva there, thank you very, very much, especially for coming into the studio. Great to have you on the show, and human rights campaigner as well, Peter Tatchell, of course. Great stuff, guys. Thank you so, so much. Well, anyway, after the break, members of the royal family apparently are heading to Rwanda, believe it or not. But does it have anything to do with the Home Secretary's offshore processing plan? That's all after the weather.
Hi there, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. It's a bright Friday for many of us with some decent sunny spells, particularly in the south, but it will be windy, particularly in the north, with showers affecting much of Scotland and Northern Ireland. That's because low pressure is approaching, this low unseasonably deep for early June. It brought a weather front across the UK, but that didn't bring much rain. And now we're in the showery, windy airflow that circulates the low. As a result, well, it's really Western Scotland and Northern Ireland that bear the brunt of the strongest winds and the heaviest showers, some hail and thunder mixed in with the downpours, and the risk of coastal gales for exposed parts of Western Scotland. Feeling cool here, but elsewhere, actually very few showers, sunny spells, and although breezy, it will be warm in the east. Eastern Scotland, 20 Celsius, Eastern England, 23 to 24. Overnight, the showers continue across much of Scotland. In fact, some more persistent rain coming along later on. And there'll be showers trickling into northern and western England as well as Wales. But elsewhere, clear spells and perhaps a few shallow mist and fog patches forming in the south of England by dawn. A mild night for many, although in some sheltered spots, temperatures will dip into the single figures. A bright start then, once again, for much of England and Wales, southern and eastern Scotland. But for Northern Ireland, for much of Scotland, once again, showers or longer spells of rain and that strong wind continuing. A breezy day for many and a few more showers, I think, compared to Friday for Western England as well as for Wales. But away from the showers, decent sunny spells. And again, high teens in the west and the north, mid to low 20s in the south and the east. Saturday evening brings further outbreaks of rain for central and western Scotland, showers for northern England, western parts of Wales. But then Sunday looks a bit quieter, less windy, still some showers, but fewer and less heavy.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Yes, morning everybody, it's 10:24. This is To The Point with me, Patrick Christie's, right here on GB News, live as ever on your TV, online and radio this morning. Now, Prince Charles and the Duchess of Cornwall are, heading to Rwanda this month, apparently, deputising for the Queen in what will be the first royal visit to the country ever. The trip comes ahead of the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, which is due to be held in the country from the 20th of June. Meanwhile, Jamaica has officially started proceedings to remove Her Majesty the Queen as head of state. Well, the studio's just got significantly better looking because Cameron Walker's here to talk us through all of this.
Flatter me, Patrick.
There you go, mate. It is Friday after all. OK, so let's start with the Rwanda stuff first and foremost. So they're going to Rwanda.
They are going to Rwanda, yeah. It's one of the very few countries that Her Majesty the Queen has never visited before. It's mainly for the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, which is happening in a couple of weeks. But beforehand, they're focusing on a number of issues close to the Prince's heart. So climate change, opportunities for young people. And there's also a particular focus on the Rwandan genocide, which happened in 1994, where hundreds of thousands of people were killed. And they're going to be visiting a village on their first day of the trip to meet survivors and also perpetrators of that event at a reconciliation village. Wow. So I think that's going to be quite hard-hitting for them before they go on to the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting. It's the first one Prince Charles has actually attended since the leaders voted him in as the next head of the Commonwealth when Her Majesty the Queen is no longer with us. So it's quite significant.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jamaica as well now, obviously a bit of a, different tone, really, I suppose. So they are officially starting, I suppose, what would you call it, independence procedures, maybe, or getting rid of us as the head of their Commonwealth?
Yes, according to reports, that is correct. So the government, which was voted in Jamaica a couple of years ago now, said in their manifesto that they would kind of get Jamaica out of the monarchy. And it looks like they have started proceedings to do that. But it's not quite as simple as just rubber stamping, we no longer want the Queen, we're going to get rid of her. It takes a lot of procedure. So there has to be 2 votes in their parliaments, in their House and in their Senate. And then it has to be put to the people in a referendum.
Oh, OK.
But from recent polls, the recent poll I could find, which from last year, suggests 55% of the population of Jamaica do want to become a republic and no longer have the Queen as head of state. We know Barbados in November 2021 got rid of Her Majesty the Queen as head of state and is now a republic. So, and also with the recent Caribbean tours, got quite a lot of bad publicity and press with, protests and demands for apologies for the royal family's role in the historical slave trade. It could perhaps start a domino effect of countries.
Yeah, indeed. I think this would be a massive concern, really. But it is an issue. It's yet another element, I think, Cameron, of the legacy of our dear Queen, really, because she is an institution in her own right. And then when she goes, OK, I think, I don't quite know exactly how popular Charles is at home or abroad, but, I mean, it does seem a bit like the end, well, it is the end of an era, and I think that maybe we're going to see a bit of this, like you said, maybe a potential domino effect, do you think, maybe, of Commonwealth nations?
Well, I think the monarchy survives because it can adapt to change. And I think Prince Charles and Prince William, his son, to some extent, are very much aware of that, which is why I think we were seeing a slimmed-down version of the monarchy on the balcony at Trooping the Colour last week, and Prince Charles's perhaps plans for the future of the monarchy. I don't think there's any getting away from the fact that a vast majority of these Caribbean nations who still hold Her Majesty the Queen as head of state have done for kind of historical reasons due to colonialism, and I think they're catching on to the fact that there are other options for them. However, the British monarchy does a lot of brilliant work abroad. It really highlights issues in these countries which wouldn't necessarily be highlighted, human rights issues, charity work as well. So there is still support for the monarchy in the Caribbean, but I think there's a generational gap between younger people and older people.
Yes, and just on a slightly different thing, you were at the Jubilee concert, weren't you, I believe?
Yeah.
Was it good? Was it a good night?
It was an amazing night. My biggest problem was there seems to be about 4 bars for 22,000 people. So but the concert itself was absolutely
that might have been deliberate, I think. I wonder whether they probably didn't want everyone. I did enjoy all the footage of. I mean, Prince Louis. I know Prince Louis wasn't there, but I mean, he seems wild.
Oh, he was. He was absolutely wild. He definitely stole the show, but in a good way. He definitely did. Yeah, on the balcony, covering his ears when the fly past was happening because it was too loud for him.
Right.
And what else did he do? Oh, yes.
Well, he did that.
He did that
yeah.
at Kate, didn't he? Yes, when he was watching the pageant. So, yeah, he definitely stole the show. And then Kensington Palace actually tweeted out their thanks to the people who supported the Jubilee celebrations. And at the end of that message, they said, we all really enjoyed it, especially Prince Louis.
Especially Prince Louis, exactly. Cameron, look, thank you so much. Great to have you on the show, as always, of course. Cameron Walker there, of course, our royal reporter, just discussing loads of stuff, frankly. So quite big stuff, that, really, I think, isn't it? Certainly about the fact that, obviously, Charles and Camilla are off to Rwanda. But I think, arguably more importantly, anyway, the fact that, of course, Jamaica now is starting to, essentially, maybe introduce procedures to remove the Queen as head of state. How do you feel about that? But I'm going to go into the inbox now, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Lots of people getting in touch with what I was saying about earlier about this Cineworld protest stuff, OK? So people are saying, look, actually, you know, this is... We shouldn't accept this. This is Barbara who's been in touch saying we shouldn't accept that people, obviously, are doing all of this stuff. She says that we do accept, though, absolutely, right, and you're spot on about this, Barbara, that people have different faiths, of course, and this, that and the other, but the majority of British people don't force our religious beliefs on to others, and that is Barbara's view. How do you feel about what's going on there? Now, if you are just joining us, of course, it is basically about this idea that there's a particular film now being shown at Cineworld Cinemas, View Cinemas or wherever, right? And apparently it depicts the Prophet Muhammad and his daughter, which obviously is, well, it's offensive to Muslims, right? And there's been crowds, some would say a mob, I suppose, really, outside various different cities in the UK protesting. The Cineworld has now pulled the film. My view is that it's giving into mob rule because, OK, fair enough, if you are offended by something, just don't watch it, OK? That's my view, just don't watch it. And I don't really think that we should be giving into this kind of stuff because where does it end? But anyway, keep these views coming in. I believe these protesters are apparently shooting themselves in the foot. This is what Graham says. I would not have been interested in the film, but now I want to see it. So there you go, Graham. Good stuff. OK, I understand that. Well, look, after the break, ladies and gentlemen, from the royal family to the first family, OK? So Hunter Biden's ex-wife has come out with even more scandalous stories about the president's son. We look into that in a lot more detail after these latest headlines.
Good morning, 10:31. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. The Foreign Secretary will address the death sentences given to 2 British men when she speaks to her Ukrainian counterpart later today. Aidan Aslin and Sean Pinner were found guilty of mercenary activities by a court in the pro-Russian region of Donetsk. Liz Truss described the verdict as a sham judgment with no legitimacy. A bid to block a deportation flight to Rwanda is being heard in the High Court. Lawyers representing more than 90 people have submitted a legal challenge against the government's policy to send asylum seekers to the African nation. The first flight's due to leave next Tuesday. Lawyers argue the policy is unlawful. 5 men have been arrested on suspicion of the murder of Simon Dobbin. The football fan was left with permanent brain damage after being attacked on his way home from a match in Southend in 2015. He died 5 years later, aged 48. MPs have criticised the government's plan to burn £4 billion worth of unusable personal protective equipment. The Department of Health and Social Care has been accused of wasting 75% of the £12 billion it spent on PPE during the first year of the pandemic. The Public Accounts Committee wants the government to clarify its plans for the equipment, including expected costs to the Treasury and the environment. And the discovery of the HMS Gloucester, which sank in 1682, has been hailed as the most important maritime find since the Mary Rose. The royal warship was carrying the future King of England, King James II, when it ran aground some 28 miles off Great Yarmouth. It was found by 2 brothers back in 2007, but has only now been revealed due to security reasons. TV online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound is 1.248 to the dollar. It's 1.176 to the euro. And the price of gold currently stands at £1,478.09 per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the finance report on GB News, Investments That Matter.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
On radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you. And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
we're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Morning, everybody. It's 10:36. This is To The Point with me, Patrick Christie's on GB News Live, as ever, on your TV, online and radio this morning. Now, we're going over the pond. We're going to America. So the Congressional Committee investigating the January 2021 Capitol riots held its first public hearing yesterday, accusing former President Donald Trump of attempting a political coup by intentionally stirring up a riot. I know a lot of you have very strong views on this, but we'll get stuck into all of that in a little bit. But his daughter, Ivanka Trump, got it right again, appeared to distance herself from the father during the hearing, saying that she felt there was no reason to doubt the 2020 election results, that those who rioted basically were protesting against. Well, meanwhile, Hunter Biden, the very troubled son of President Joe Biden, is about to find himself in even deeper scandal, apparently, than that time the modern Rosetta Stone of white and blue-collar crime was found on his laptop. So his ex-wife is about to publish her memoirs describing in detail the drug and sex-fueled life of the man currently under investigation for potential tax evasion, money laundering and foreign consultancy work. Well, Sarah Elliott is a spokeswoman for Republicans Overseas UK and joins me now. Thank you very much, Sarah. Great to have you on the show. Let's start with the Trump stuff, the Capitol riot stuff. So what's the latest on that then, really?
Well, it's a very partisan, democratically led, and when I mean democratically led, I mean Democratic Party-led investigation into what happened on January 6th. I say it's partisan because Nancy Pelosi would not allow certain Republicans on the panel and would only have Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, who actually agree with Democrats on what happened on January 6th. So for many Republicans like myself, we're not that tuned into this partisan show. It is basically to help them in the midterms. It has very much political leanings and implications for them. But I don't think it's the fair hearing that the country actually deserves to get on what actually happened that day.
OK, yeah, no, I understand. I mean, I suppose it centres really largely around whether or not President Trump, I suppose, incited this stuff. Now, look, my view is that he didn't, and frankly, everyone's entitled to do, well, not entitled to do whatever they want in this case, but of course, I don't think that he necessarily did incite it. But some people claim that he did. And why are they saying that he did? Is he saying that you know, he was like, you know, go out and speak about this, that, and the other, and people took that to a much more further conclusion and basically stormed the Capitol building?
Well, listen, you know, in politics, there's a lot of fiery rhetoric, and there's a lot of go fight, go take them down, you know. This is, and Trump was known for saying this was a stolen election. They should overturn the electoral college.
Sorry to ask you a question and immediately interrupt you, but on that, do you think the election was stolen?
No, I do not.
Right.
And I say that I don't think it was stolen, is it wasn't proven that it was stolen. Now, I think there was definitely election fraud. We know that. We know dead people voted. We know felons voted. We know that there were mishaps with the electric voting machines, but we don't actually have enough to prove that it swayed the election. And Donald Trump had a very short period of time in which to prove this was the case. He did not have a sophisticated legal team that was able to do it. And so we accept the outcome as it was. You know, I personally took a stand and distanced myself from President Trump after January 6th because he helped to lose the Georgia Senate seats in that special election, which should have gone to Republicans and given us a majority in the U.S. Senate. And he also, I do think he did play a role that day. He did not act in decisive leadership on January 6th in condemning the violence. And but, you know, I think all politicians in this very fiery atmosphere need to be cognizant of their language and the words they use, because people are starting to take it literally on both sides of the aisle.
Yeah, so just talking of language, actually, I'm just reading this out, so it's important I get this right. But according to reports, anyway, Trump told staff that Mike Pence deserved to be hanged during a Capitol attack. I mean, what do you think of that?
Well, it's unacceptable. I mean, that's just, it's horrific. And if he really said that, I mean, I know he never called the vice president to see how he was or to see how he was doing. I mean, they had nooses on the Capitol lawn saying, "Hang Mike Pence." They were chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." You know, I think there was real dereliction of leadership that day by President Trump. And that's why I publicly don't think he's the best messenger for us going forward. But I do think his message and his policies worked during his administration. I think they're better for the country. And we just need to take that message and have a new messenger.
OK, well, just moving away from that now and on to Hunter Biden. So the latest that we're hearing anyway is that basically apparently his ex-wife is about to publish her memoirs describing in detail the drug and sex-fueled life of Hunter Biden. I mean, is it a bit unfair to go after Joe Biden because of his son?
I mean, I don't think so. Not from what these emails reveal. It's not just sex, drug addiction, and then hooking up with your brother's widow. It is actual business dealings where the family members are getting different percentages of the money, cash for access, from Chinese business firms, from places like Burisma, where Hunter Biden was on the board of the Ukrainian energy company and earning $40,000 a month. He received money from the mayor of Moscow's wife. I mean, what is going on here? He received a diamond ring from a CCP official. This is all like blatant corruption. There was a other business associate that came out right before the 2020 election who confirmed all of this, that the big guy in the emails is Joe Biden. He got 10% of these dealings. I mean, Hunter Biden.
When you consider what people went after Trump for and the kind of very protracted legal hearings that they had there about whether or not Russia stole the US election, yada, yada, yada. We had a bit of that over here, of course, with Brexit as well. But, I mean, when you actually look at some of the things that Joe Biden or his son have been accused of, for example, you could argue that, you know, maybe they're the ones who should be having a much more closer look taken at them.
Absolutely. This stuff should have been front page news in the 2 weeks leading up to the 2020 election. I mean, you want to talk about electioneering or election fraud, the absolute bias in the U.S. media and the world media on this topic has been really surprising and shocking. And I also think that Hunter Biden is, who knows what he's still up to now, you know, and what is the president doing today? He is under investigation for tax fraud. But he's obviously a very distraught individual, but this raises serious questions as to the man in the White House.
Yeah, OK, thank you very much, Sarah. Sarah Elliott there, of course, spokeswoman for Republicans Overseas UK. Pleasure to have you on the show. You'll have to come back very, very soon. But, yes, it's that time of the morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's time for the controversy. That's right. And today, I'm going to look at the UK's obesity crisis. I only have to look down to do that, but anyway, there we go. According to the Health Survey for England, out of every 1,000 adults in England, 280 of us are obese and 33 are morbidly obese. But apparently researchers want you to drop the word morbidly, as they say it's offensive. Yes, so the Obesity Action Coalition president says the old expression, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me, doesn't apply to those living with obesity. Well, by the way, this guy's, I think, arguably my favourite ever guest that we get on. I just love him. Weight loss hypnotherapist, motivational coach, founder of Fatnosis and the star of TV's Fat Family, Steve Miller, joins me now. Steve, how are you?
Oh, my goodness, flirting with me at this time in the morning. How the devil are you? Are you losing weight?
Well, I should be, but I mean, it's the jury's out on exactly how much weight I've lost. I've avoided the scales for a couple of weeks now. Our office is just directly opposite both an M&S and a load of fast food chains, and I think that's not my fault. But look, the word morbidly, OK, is it offensive?
Listen, let's get down to brass tacks and be to the point. If you are too fat, life is morbid. It's horrible. And if you are too fat, you're on death row. And to soften it down, I think, is just ludicrous. And the thing that I would say, because this article has made me smile, is I support people that are too fat every single day. And I love what I do, and I do it well. You want to listen to the language they use. I tell you what, it's far worse than using a word morbidly obese. It's just ridiculous. So I think what we're doing here, it's and I don't know who these experts are, but I think it's an attempt to pander to the sort of political correct brigade and to soften it all down. Now, the one thing that I will say is when I knew I was doing this interview, I actually ran a poll. And based on 78 results, the results are 88% of people said it's ridiculous. Keep it as morbidly obese. And just 12% actually said, yes, it may be a little bit more, delicate and sensitive to actually change it. I think we've got to be really careful in this country because we are normalizing to a large degree obesity. We are going very soft on fat, where in fact we need to be not cruel to people, but honest with people. And the reality is, if you are too fat, then death is on its way, and early death is possibly on its way. So let's not water it down.
Yeah, I mean, I did a thing yesterday about whether or not we should raise the age of consent, I suppose, for smoking cigarettes to 21, OK? And people are very, very conscious of that. You tax the living heck out of people who smoke and, booze as tax. And look, fine, OK, fair enough. I'm not saying that that's necessarily the worst thing in the world. But what I am saying is if we're doing that, we should also be able to have a conversation about obesity, the burden that puts on our NHS as well.
Oh, completely. Absolutely. And I have to say, what I do find is often it is very slim, middle-class people who enjoy sociology that come out with some of this ridiculous stuff. When you talk to down-to-earth people who are really struggling with their weight, they find all of this claptrap very, very patronising. So I say, get rid of all this political correct nonsense and let's get reality on the table. If you're fat, you're fat. If you're morbidly obese, you're morbidly obese. Take that message on board and allow it to motivate you to do something about it. It's not about being cruel to people. It's about being honest with people. And unfortunately, in this country, we seem to normalize so much and love, big models and all of this sort of thing to such a degree now that people are nervous to say the word fat. Listen, fat is tissue. It's real. And we've got to get over this nervousness.
I want to get you on that, because you raised a really interesting point there about adverts and things with things like plus-size models and stuff like that. And look, I mean, for some people, genuinely, fat is beautiful, right? Genuinely, for some people, that's something they find really, really attractive. OK, cool. So, but do you think that maybe we're normalising it too much, or almost kind of idealising it a little bit?
Of course, we're absolutely normalising it. I mean, you know, I get told off all the time for using the word fat, and I'm a man of practical common sense. What we've got to do when it comes to promoting bodies and whatever is, yes, to understand that people do come in different shapes, but when it comes to promoting, we promote a normal shape, a healthy body. Rather than saying, you know, here's someone that's very super morbidly obese, let's all delight in it, isn't it wonderful? Because it's not wonderful. It kills you. And we have to remember, you know, as cancer research have told us many times, that obesity now has a real alignment to triggering cancer. So we've got to take these hard messages on board. And I am not going to celebrate something that can lead people to dying of cancer. No,
look, and you speak a lot of common sense, Steve, and that's why we love you. Steve Miller there, thank you very, very much for, yet again, being on the show and brightening it with your presence. So weight loss hypnotherapist there, of course, motivational coach, founder of Fat Notice, and the star of TV's Fat Families. Can I just politely suggest that everyone goes on YouTube, obviously once this show's finished, and Googles Fat Families and has a look at it, because Steve really knocked that one out of the park. Steve Miller there, giving us his views. And by the way, on the kind of obesity stuff, as people will be aware, I am, with limited success, trying to lose a bit of weight at the minute. And I, yesterday, went and learnt my dance routine for the Dream Boys. So I am raising money for charity. We've raised you have raised about 20-odd grand so far, and it's justgiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christie's. We're trying to do it for Mind, the mental health charity, of course. But yes, yesterday I went and learnt my Dream Boys routine, and it really is quite something. But we'll move away from that now. Let's take you through some of the headlines that you might have missed. So Australia is suffering from a shortage of lettuce following severe floods in the states of New South Wales and Queensland. So fast food chain KFC are apparently resorting to some extreme measures that the new Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese apparently calls just wrong. Take a listen to this.
Did you hear?
Cars outside.
Did you hear about KFC? They're not using lettuce anymore. They have to use cabbage because of our lettuce crisis.
This is a crisis.
It is.
My son loves KFC.
Me too.
When he hears about it, he's going to be devastated.
Well, tell him this, Prime Minister, because
a bit extreme, doesn't it?
It's crazy. But when you go to KFC, they're just substituting it with cabbage, unless you say in the drive-through, no cabbage for me, I want the lettuce. Then they give you the lettuce.
Cabbage isn't the same as lettuce.
No.
That's right.
I heard someone say it tastes better.
That's just wrong.
No, I can't imagine it tastes better.
Like, I know you've got a lot of the priorities of Australia's safety, but can you add that to your list of sort of...
I'll put it on the list. We've got a cabinet meeting today, so I'll put it on the list. Cabbage Gate.
Right, some weird stuff about cabbage there. But I remember when KFC in this country actually ran out of chicken, which I think is a lot more pressing than the idea they might be resorting to using cabbage instead of lettuce. But there we go, anyway. So former Oasis frontman Liam Gallagher performed at Nebworth in Hertfordshire on Saturday. But don't worry, if you missed out on a piece of the action, then you can buy a piece of the grass, apparently, for a cool £65,000 on eBay. So, yes, Oasis mega fan David Watson stashed some Nebworth grass in his shorts after attending the gig and apparently listed the prized possession on eBay for just £5. But 3 days and 100 bids later, the bidding currently stands at £65,000. I mean, goodness me. I believe that there was a while where I used to live up in the Lake District and people were selling a jar of Lake District air on eBay. So basically they'd go outside, presumably with a jar, just swoop it through the air, put a cap on it and sell it on eBay, and basically Americans buy it for loads of money. Anyway, right. New Zealand is going to tax cow farts and burps in order to help tackle climate change. Yeah, you heard. Scientists believe the methane gases that come out of cattle's front and rear ends contribute to the greenhouse gases that pollute Earth's atmosphere and create holes in its ozone layer. So almost half of New Zealand's total greenhouse gases come from agriculture, with the country's windy cattle among the worst offences. Farmers will now have to pay a tax on their gas emissions from 20 25. Goodness gracious me. I mean, this is unbelievable, isn't it? So not only is there like a cost of living crisis, is there, high energy bills, all of this stuff. Now, if you own a cow, you have to pay for its farts. I mean, it's just unbelievable, really, isn't it? But there we go. So, a little reminder, of course, as well, just before we move on to some of your views, anyway, a little reminder that every single Wednesday, Mercy and I hand our show over to you. It's your show. We are the People's Channel, of course, full of your ideas and what you want us to talk about. So, what you think are the most important stories. So get in touch, tell us what you think you want covering. What do you want to see on the news, really? That's the point of this show, isn't it? Well, email us to thepoint@gbnews.uk. But talking of you, the people at home, people listening on radio, of course, people watching online, we're going to go into our inbox right now. Thank you very much, everyone who's been getting in touch as well. A lot of reaction, it's fair to say, to what's been going on outside the Cineworld cinemas. Various different protests, kind of numerous different locations across the country. There's a film that's come out that... I mean, I haven't seen it. Well, you can't see it now at Cineworld because they've cancelled it. But allegedly, anyway, depicts the Prophet Muhammad and, I believe, his daughter, which clearly a lot of the Muslim community find deeply offensive. But there's been kind of crowds, I suppose, really, outside these cinemas protesting about this. Cineworld have caved in now, cancelled this film. I want to know how you feel about this. I mean, at the same time as you want to be, I'm sure we all want to be, incredibly, sensitive to other people's ideologies, etc. There's no doubt about that. We're a fantastically multicultural country, and I really do rate that. But at the same time, should we be cancelling a film because it offends a few people? You could argue, just don't go and watch the film, I suppose. But yes, a load of people getting in touch on that. John has been in touch to say, yes, I think it's an absolute outrage. We are, quote, giving in to mob rule. And I'm inclined to believe you, John. Keep these views coming in, gbviews, gbnews.uk. Keep all of those thoughts coming in on that email. You can tweet us as well, at GBNews. But we'll be back after this very, very short break.
Hi there, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. It's a bright Friday for many of us with some decent sunny spells, particularly in the south. But it will be windy, particularly in the north, with showers affecting much of Scotland and Northern Ireland. That's because low pressure is approaching this low unseasonably deep for early June. It brought a weather front across the UK, but that didn't bring much rain. And now we're in the showery, windy airflow that circulates the low. As a result, well, it's really Western Scotland and Northern Ireland that bear the brunt of the strongest winds and the heaviest showers, some hail and thunder mixed in with the downpours, and the risk of coastal gales for exposed parts of Western Scotland. Feeling cool here, but elsewhere, actually very few showers, sunny spells, and although breezy, it will be warm in the east. Eastern Scotland, 20 Celsius, Eastern England, 23 to 24. Overnight, the showers continue across much of Scotland. In fact, some more persistent rain coming along later on. And there'll be showers trickling into northern and western England as well as Wales. But elsewhere, clear spells and perhaps a few shallow mist and fog patches forming in the south of England by dawn. A mild night for many, although in some sheltered spots, temperatures will dip into the single figures. A bright start then, once again, for much of England and Wales, southern and eastern Scotland. But for Northern Ireland, for much of Scotland, once again, showers or longer spells of rain and that strong wind continuing. A breezy day for many and a few more showers, I think, compared to Friday for Western England as well as for Wales. But away from the showers, decent sunny spells. And again, high teens in the west and the north, mid to low 20s in the south and the east. Saturday evening brings further outbreaks of rain for central and western Scotland, showers for northern England, western parts of Wales. But then Sunday looks a bit quieter, less windy, still some showers, but fewer and less heavy.
Join me, Gloria De Piero, Monday to Thursday at noon for The Briefing. We go to the parts of Parliament that you won't see elsewhere. Plus, there's exclusive interviews with MPs from all parties.
But quite often, they paper over the real truth. Why does a working class lad like you join the Tories?
That's a good question.
Don't miss it. Monday to Thursdays at noon on GB News.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices. With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Yes, well, good morning, everybody. Patrick Christie's here on To The Point, and I'm with you for the next hour or so. We're going to be dragging you kicking and screaming, hopefully, into the weekend. And loads of your views as well, GB Views at gbnews.uk. Keep those views coming in. Loads of reaction to what's been going on, of course, as well outside the cine worlds across the country, with a protest that's taking place about a particular film there that apparently depicts the Prophet Muhammad. How do you feel about all of this, people? I'm saying that I think we're giving into mob rule, essentially. But anyway, make sure you do get in touch with your views, gbviews at gbnews.uk. We'll go to those throughout the show, but first, it's time for your latest headlines.
Thank you, Patrick. Good morning. It's just gone 11 o'clock. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. A human rights expert says the death sentences given to 2 British fighters in Ukraine are baseless and they're being used as political tools by Russia. Aidan Aslin and Sean Pinner were found guilty of mercenary activities by a court in the pro-Russian region of Donetsk. The Foreign Secretary Liz Truss, who described the verdict as a sham judgment with no legitimacy, will discuss the case with her Ukrainian counterpart today. Human rights campaigner Peter Tatchell says the men are prisoners of war and should be given immunity under the Geneva Convention.
There's no evidence that we've heard of that either of these men have committed any war crime. They have not killed civilians. They have not attacked civilian targets like hospitals or churches or other places, protected places under the Geneva Convention. So the charges have no substance. And it's very clear that Russia is using their case in a bid to put pressure on Western authorities.
Well, in Ukraine, Aidan's friend and fighter Brennan Phillips told GB News the West must close the country's airspace to Russia.
That is what they use to dictate the tempo and of the combat operations on the ground. And the only reason they've been able to make advances, a decisive Ukrainian victory is the best means to securing their release, and will give the UK and the Ukrainian government leverage to negotiate the terms of their release.
A bid to block a deportation flight to Rwanda is being heard in the High Court. Lawyers representing more than 90 people have submitted a legal challenge against the government's policy to send asylum seekers to the African nation. The first flight is due to leave next Tuesday. Lawyers argue the policy is unlawful. They're seeking to stop all flights until a full hearing can be heard later in the year. 5 men have been arrested on suspicion of the murder of a football fan. Simon Dobbin was left with permanent brain damage after being attacked on his way home from a match in Southend in 2015. He died 5 years later, aged 48. Police say medical tests showed a direct link between his death and the injuries he sustained. MPs have criticised the government's plan to burn £4 billion worth of unusable personal protective equipment. The Department of Health and Social Care has been accused of wasting 75% of the £12 billion it spent on PPE during the first year of the pandemic. The Public Accounts Committee wants the government to clarify its plans for the equipment, including expected costs to the Treasury and the environment. Transport for London and First Group are expected to admit failings over the Croydon tram crash in 2016. 7 passengers died and 51 were injured when a tram derailed in South London. TfL and the tram owner are accused of health and safety failings that caused the incident. Transport for London says a guilty plea will enable court proceedings to come to a conclusion as promptly as possible. 14,000 new school places will be created as part of the government's levelling up plans. Up to 75 new free schools and sixth forms will open in 55 areas identified as needing education investment. The first is expected to open in September 2025. School Standards Minister Robin Walker told GB News that supporting younger generations is a priority.
We need to be levelling up across the country, and that's why I think the targeting of the support for schools that I'm announcing today is really important. We've got these 55 education investment areas. We want to prioritise those for new schools, so that actually areas where perhaps children haven't had the opportunity to progress post-16 previously can have that gap filled. Have that opportunity to go as far as they can in their education and perhaps to go on to university, perhaps to take our new T-levels so that they can have the best chances in the workplace.
And the discovery of a shipwrecked royal warship has been hailed the most important maritime find since the Mary Rose. HMS Gloucester sank in 1682 while carrying the future King of England, King James II. The shipwreck was discovered by 2 brothers off the coast of Norfolk back in 2007 following a 4-year search, but has only just been made public due to security reasons. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. First, though, it's back to Patrick with To The Point.
A very good morning, everybody. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Patrick Christys, on your TV, radio and online. I've got a great show lined up for you to kickstart your day. So here's what's on the menu for the next hour. Priti Patel's plan to send asylum seekers to Rwanda as soon as next week is facing a legal challenge under emergency proceedings launched in the High Court this week. So our reporter Paul Hawkins will be there for the very latest. We'll also be getting stuck into a debate on the National Health Service with 2 GPs. We're going head-to-head with 2 GPs. Anyway, the government plans to burn £4 billion of unusable PPE, and chemists might soon be able to sign sick notes in a plan to ease the pressure on GP appointments. Send us your thoughts on how the NHS needs to improve. I know a lot of people watching this, listening to us on radio, watching us online, will have had their own stories, often, unfortunately, horror stories, really, about what's going on in the NHS. GBViews, gbnews.uk. I want to hear from you on that, OK? Anyway, a high-caffeine energy drink, apparently, could be banned in Wales for under-16s. New government proposals might mean that takeaways could also be stopped from opening near schools, and free soft drink refills could also be banned. Is this for our own good, or is this just yet more state control? We'll be getting stuck into all of that. We have all of that coming up and much, much more across this programme. You can get in touch, as always. There's loads if you have already today, by the way. Thank you, everybody. GBViews at gbnews.uk. But yes, let's get stuck in. Right, OK, so I'm going to go straight into that inbox, actually, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Like I said, loads of you getting in touch. Thank you very much for everybody. People's being quite sceptical, actually, like Brian, about the Rwanda deal, saying that they don't really feel like it's going to actually work. People saying that Brian is basically saying that it's not going to act as a deterrent. And I think that's kind of the point, isn't it? For me, the Rwanda deal only really works if it is a deterrent, because that's kind of what it's supposed to do, right? But actually, if it emerges that we're only going to send, like, a couple of hundred people to Rwanda, well, we've already had 10,000 people come over the channel this year, so they know that their odds are pretty good, don't they? So I don't really see why that would really stop anybody, but yes, a lot of people getting in touch as well. We did a segment earlier on about, remember the Capitol Hill riots, of course, where after the latest election in America anyway, and now there's basically a hearing into what happened there, victim testimony or witness testimony, I suppose you could say. And a lot of people have been getting in touch. It clearly does appear like quite a lot of you do genuinely think that the American election was stolen. So interesting stuff. Keep those views coming in. And yes, a lot of reaction. I mean, the vast majority of you have been getting in touch to say about what's been going on outside Cineworlds up and down the country. This Lady of Heaven film that apparently depicts the Prophet Muhammad and his daughter. And there's been, I suppose, what would you say, not riots, but I don't know, gatherings outside various cinemas. And yeah, this is it. And this is Phil who's being in touch to say, we shouldn't be dictated to by a small fraction of people. And that's kind of the thing. And I want to make this very, very clear, because I did a monologue on this earlier. You know, this is a very small section of the UK's Muslim population that are outside Cineworlds in places like Bolton and things like that. So, you know, it's important that we make that very, very clear. But, however, it's that very small section, very hard line, that, in my opinion, we seem to kind of give into quite a lot. Look what happened at Batley Grammar School, for example. As far as I'm aware, there's a bloke who is going to be in protective custody for the rest of his life for showing a group of kids a picture of the Prophet Muhammad. Now, yeah, OK, fair enough, I wouldn't have done that myself, don't get me wrong. But, at the same time, is this the way that we really want our society to go? But anyway, move on from that now. So, a group of charities, action groups and unions are bringing apparently a legal challenge to the Home Office ahead of the first flight taking migrants to Rwanda. So, cross-channel asylum seekers have been given notice that they'll be processed in Rwanda and given the opportunity to rebuild their lives in safety in a partnership brokered between Priti Patel and the Rwandan government. Well, our national reporter, Paul Hawkins, was at the Royal Courts of Justice in central London for us this morning.
This application for an injunction has been brought by human rights groups and solicitors representing 4 asylum seekers who are due on that flight, that first flight out to Rwanda on Tuesday. So this is an 11th hour bid to get an injunction to stop the flight leaving. They've also asked that if the judge does approve that injunction, then in fact it applies to the whole flight leaving and not just to those 4 asylum seekers. Now, the groups say that the Home Secretary does not have the requisite legal authority. They're saying Rwanda is not a safe third country to send these people to, that there is an inadequate provision for malaria prevention and it doesn't comply with the Human Rights Act. The government, on the other hand, they're arguing that this policy is necessary to stop the trading of people across the channel, to stop people smuggling. It's saying that only those that are eligible to be sent to Rwanda are those that have made dangerous, unnecessary or illegal crossings. And that is one of the reasons why they've come to this agreement with Rwanda to send people there where their asylum claim can be processed, where they're given accommodation, they're given access to translation services, food and water while their claim is processed. And then if it is successful, they then undergo a 5-year stay in the country where they're given, they're able to have a job, to work, they've given access to healthcare, they're given somewhere to stay, and they can continue to pursue their life there if they are successful with their asylum claim in Rwanda. It's a controversial policy, and right now the High Court is hearing arguments from both sides and will then come to a decision on whether that injunction should be granted.
Yeah, that's Paul Hawkins there. Thank you for that, Paul. Then, and just as he was talking, actually, a producer scurried in and handed me a sheet of paper which says, this is just dropped, apparently, so I'll read it out to you now. So apparently in written submissions, the Home Office's lawyers said that they had cancelled the removal directions for 3 people who had asked the High Court to prevent their deportation to Rwanda. So there's a statement here that says, the defendant submits that no order for interim relief should be made, either at the individual level, to prevent the removal of the first claimant, or at the wider level, bit legally jargony this, isn't it? Or at the wider level sought by the claimants, i.e. to prevent the removal of any asylum seeker to Rwanda who has not provided informed consent. Neither such order is justified. So, I'm just reading this for the first time kind of with you now. My take on that is what? They have to consent to be sent to Rwanda. Is that the thing? Well, that kind of defeats the point, doesn't it? But there we go. Anyway, we'll bring you the very latest on all of that. Of course, I'm sure more detail about that is going to emerge very, very shortly. But how do you feel about that? I mean, let me just read that again, because, I mean, it does seem to me that, from what this statement has said, that there were 3 people who'd asked the High Court to prevent their deportation to Rwanda. The Home Office has given in to that. And apparently, according to this, what I'm reading now, it seems to say that any asylum seeker going to Rwanda who has not provided informed consent doesn't get sent to Rwanda. So, there we go. I mean, how do you feel about that, ladies and gentlemen? I imagine there'll be some quite strong views on that. GBViews, GBnews.uk. That kind of does, in my opinion anyway, massively defeat the point. But there you go. I did a statement yesterday, actually, on what I would argue is largely lefty lawyers trying to get in the way of this Rwanda deal. But at the same time, and we can't really get around this, at the same time, it did emerge, actually, that the first flight to Rwanda, scheduled to take place, I believe, next week, is coming into force, actually, supposedly anyway, before the law itself comes into force, which doesn't really smack of particularly good foresight or pre-planning from the government in that sense. And if indeed it has emerged now that you have to have informed consent in order to go to Rwanda, then apparently the whole thing's gone pop, hasn't it? But there we go. Anyway, moving on. As the nation prepares to commemorate the 40th anniversary of the liberation of the Falkland Islands next week, GB News has been given access to previously unseen images of the conflict. So the pictures taken at the time by a young Falklands photojournalist have gone on display at a special exhibition in historic Chatham Dockyard. You can see an extended feature on these powerful images on GB News digital platforms right now, but here's a sneak peek.
The surrender in full swing here. I mean, you can see all the detritus around the streets as well.
These Argentines are being rounded up by British troops. You can see, I think, Paras or Marines doing their best to round them up and at the same time getting these men to clear up a little bit. But the mess was unspeakable. This was one of our general stores here, which had been torched and was gone, but the smoke was still lingering. And when I look at these, I can almost still smell them. It was just a complete scene out of hell.
Yes, gosh, I often think that the Falklands War gets a bit forgotten, actually, really, and that we don't, you know, when we have, like, Remembrance Day and this, that and the other, which is obviously really, really important, but, you know, it's all about kind of World War II, World War I, and that's all, you know, really important stuff. But actually the Falklands War was a lot more recent, really, and I think certainly people in my generation, I didn't really learn about that in school. Learned about World War I, learned about World War II, learned about the Tudors. Well, I don't know why, but I didn't really learn about the Falklands War, really, and I think it's quite important because it was a lot more recent, and I think if we, you know, kind of ignore that, then, you know, it's a bit of a shame, really, for all the people who did get horrendously injured or died over there, really, and we should remember that. But anyway, a reminder that GB News will have live coverage throughout the special day of Falklands commemoration next Tuesday. But 2 brothers from Norfolk have discovered, moving on, the Gloucester, which is a warship which sunk more than 340 years ago. So this is the best preserved 17th century royal ship ever discovered off the British coastline, and it is hoped that its contents will help shine a light on British maritime history. Well, our East of England reporter, Ed Crawford, went to meet the brothers and to find out more about their discovery.
From the Norfolk coast, these are the first images of the Gloucester made public. The secrets of the Gloucester have been hidden under Norfolk's waters for hundreds of years until now.
I could just see looming in the distance big black shapes, shadows if you like, on the seabed. Boomf, really excited, obviously wreckage, and literally by another 4 or 5 metres I'm kneeling on the seabed looking at this amazing shipwreck, just in awe. What was so nice is on the day we found it, Dad was out there as well, yeah, with us, so all 3 of us together.
The brothers couldn't be sure whether they'd found what some are calling Norfolk's Mary Rose.
Well, we were both inspired by the Mary Rose. As youngsters we saw them lifting the hull, and that always stuck in our mind, and I think that's what led us towards looking for older shipwrecks. I mean, there was certainly a moment heading back in of, wow, this could be the Gloucester. We still need to 100% identify it, and it felt like we found her. But it is what next. It is a light bulb moment. There's lots more to be done, and because we're the only people at that particular moment in time who knew where she was. Very, very special. Diver's dreams.
The brothers spent 4 years and covered thousands of nautical miles to find the Gloucester, but a key moment came with the discovery of the ship's bell.
I saw in the distance just a curved shape, instantly just knew this is, you'd had a double look at it, and you're kind of trained for, your mind's trained to look for these curves, and instantly knew it's the bell. And Julian was disappearing into the gloom, swimming past the bell. I'll try to stop saying that. And he's disappearing into the gloom. I just grabbed his fin, got him back, and I was so relieved. And then we just shared the moment together.
The brothers have discovered many rare objects, and the discovery of the Gloucester has academics and historians excited about what might be next.
The artefacts that are being rescued are unparalleled in their diversity and in terms of their richness. As a royal vessel with very significant political individuals travelling in style, this offers us a time capsule of how that travel took place.
From childhood dream to reality, the Barnwell brothers have found the Gloucester and thus written themselves in the annals of history.
Two brothers from Norfolk discovering a piece of national history. How does it feel?
Wow, it has been a strange build-up because we've kept it to ourselves and close circle of friends for so long, and to tell the world about it now and the nation is just wow, and it's just, as I said earlier, a diver's dream, and it's so nice to be sharing it. But this is just the beginning of the journey, and there's a lot more fun to be had.
This may well turn out to be Norfolk's Mary Rose, but only time will tell if this 17th century ship can be salvaged from the sea. This is Ed Crawford for GB News.
Yeah, really fascinating stuff that. Anyway, so after the break, the NHS debate. Yes, what measures should our health service take to get waiting times down, and when will it stop wasting money, really? We'll be getting stuck into that after this very, very short break.
Hi there, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. It's a bright Friday for many of us with some decent sunny spells, particularly in the south, but it will be windy, particularly in the north, with showers affecting much of Scotland and Northern Ireland. That's because low pressure is approaching, this low unseasonably deep for early June. It's brought a weather front across the UK, but that didn't bring much rain. And now we're in the showery, windy airflow that circulates the low. As a result, well, it's really Western Scotland and Northern Ireland that bear the brunt of the strongest winds and the heaviest showers, some hail and thunder mixed in with the downpours, and the risk of coastal gales for exposed parts of Western Scotland. Feeling cool here, but elsewhere, actually very few showers, sunny spells, and although breezy, it will be warm in the east. Eastern Scotland, 20 Celsius, Eastern England, 23 to 24. Overnight, the showers continue across much of Scotland. In fact, some more persistent rain comes along later on. And there'll be showers trickling into northern and western England as well as Wales. But elsewhere, clear spells and perhaps a few shallow mist and fog patches forming in the south of England by dawn. A mild night for many, although in some sheltered spots, temperatures will dip into the single figures. A bright start then, once again, for much of England and Wales, southern and eastern Scotland. But for Northern Ireland, for much of Scotland, once again, showers or longer spells of rain and that strong wind continuing. A breezy day for many and a few more showers, I think, compared to Friday for Western England as well as for Wales. But away from the showers, decent sunny spells. And again, high teens in the west and the north, mid to low 20s in the south and the east. Saturday evening brings further outbreaks of rain for central and western Scotland, showers for northern England, western parts of Wales. But then Sunday looks a bit quieter, less windy, still some showers, but fewer and less heavy.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere. We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christys.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News. Good morning, everyone. It's 11:24. This is To The Point with me, Patrick Christys, right here on GB News Live, as ever on your TV, online and radio this morning. Now, MPs have criticised the government's plans to burn £4 billion of unusable personal protective equipment that doesn't meet NHS standards. So the Public Accounts Committee has accused the Department of Health and Social Care of wasting 75% of the £12 billion it spent on PPE in the first year of the coronavirus pandemic, due to faulty kits, inflated prices, stuff like that. So what's going on with our NHS? How can the health service reform to ease pressures and cut down on waiting times and things like that, at the same time as saving a bit of money? Well, I'm going to go now to GP, Dr. Ken Aswani. Thank you very, very much, Dr. Ken. Great to have you on the show. I mean, it seems a bit odd, this, really. So we're going to burn a load of PPE, is that right?
Yeah, I mean, although we don't have sort of specific details of that, I think what the NHS is in a recovery mode at the moment. So, I mean, a lot of the effects of the COVID pandemic have lessened, and there's quite a lot of catching up to do, whether that's sort of waiting lists or long-term conditions. And in a sense, that's what we're having to prioritise. I mean, I think the COVID pandemic and what we had to do to prepare was an exceptional situation. And I think with medications and equipment, it's important not to waste any. Although I think that if there is sort of equipment that's either going to go out of date or substandard, then clearly it can't be used for patients. So we invariably get some of that in the NHS. But I think any learning from this is to make sure that we minimise any waste, because obviously any funding for the NHS, it's better if it's spent directly for patient care.
Yeah, I mean, I get a lot of emails in every single day, Dr. Ken, about people's horror stories, really, about things that have happened to them under the quotes-unquote care of the NHS. I mean, we're seeing new measures, for example, now to try and take the weight off GPs. I mean, is the reality that we just need more GPs? Is that basic? Would that solve the problem?
So I think there are a number of factors. One factor is that, yes, we definitely need more GPs, but the truth is that we need more of all staff, and that's sort of health clinical staff, but care staff as well. And the question is, how do we move from, having to see a GP every time to possibly seeing the pharmacist, the nurse, the healthcare assistant, but make sure the care is sort of supervised and make sure there is that continuity. Now, most of the population, a lot of the population have conditions such as long-term conditions such as hypertension, heart disease, diabetes. And of course, if these are not controlled, one can get sort of heart attacks or kidney failure. And I think now is the time to bring that under control and to support that as best we can. So the strategy we adopt, we just have to ensure that once, yes, we encourage people to go into the health service, but it can take 9 years to train a GP, but also to train a lot of other workers to go into other clinical areas that makes a difference. Now, one of the sort of government's requirements involve pharmacists a lot more, particularly around administration functions, and we would welcome that because pharmacists are very skilled, and actually to share some of the workload, particularly administrative workload, away from the GP allows GP time to be dedicated directly to the patient and actually to focus on the areas and their expertise, which is what they're trained for.
Do GPs work hard enough, do you think?
Well, I mean, you know, a number of my colleagues, you know, work 60, 70 hours a week. And, you know, some of them are genuinely, like with the COVID pandemic, you know, they're going in sort of 6:30 in the morning and staying till very, very late. And we're going to be careful because, you know, although some of us be quite happy to do that, we don't want to sort of precipitate burnout and fatigue and get people to lose interest. So certainly I think GPs are definitely pushing the hours. They want to sort of catch up. I think the problem is the demand is extremely high at the moment, and that's what we're trying to get on top of.
Yeah, no, good stuff, Dr. Ken. Thank you. Stay where you are, please, if that's all right, because I'm going to introduce Dr. Mike Smith now as well on this particular issue, I believe. Yes, there he is. OK, good stuff. Thank you very much for joining us. Right, so I don't know if you managed to catch a little bit of that chat that we were having earlier on there, but I think for a lot of people anyway, people are wondering whether or not the NHS spends its money well enough. So we have, you know, X amount of funding for it every single year, and it's lots. It's a huge amount of money that this country and our taxpayers devote to the NHS. Does that money get spent well enough, do you think?
I think that it's a very complicated answer to that question. I think what it doesn't get spent on is the right things, from my experience. I think, you know, we've known about the fact that we've got a workforce crisis in the NHS for over a decade now, and we've seen it go in the wrong direction. And we've seen lots of money spent on lots of new initiatives in the NHS. We've got a big reorganisation of the NHS happening on July the 1st. You know, is that the right time to do it when we've got a record low number of GPs? We've got vacancies for nurses. So I think the short answer to your question is there's a lot of money spent, probably not enough. And when it is spent, it's probably not spent on the right things.
Yeah, no, indeed. And I mean, that's part of the issue. I mean, I've done quite a lot with Dr. Ken, so I'll stick with you, Dr. Mike, for now, if that's all right. So, I mean, a lot of people are just not happy, really, with the NHS. They don't feel, I think, anymore, like if they get ill, that the NHS might actually be there for them. Is that unfair, do you think, Dr. Mike?
No, not at all. I understand their frustration. Look, I'm not happy with the NHS at the moment. You know, I've loved being a doctor for 23 years of my life, and I can't give the care I want to give at the moment. There's not enough of me, and there's too much of the patients, and it makes me feel rubbish at the end of the day when I realise that I can't give the care that I used to give 10, 15, 20 years ago. So I think that it's not you know, I don't blame people feeling that. My mum has had to wait over 12 months for a knee replacement, and she's had to dip into her savings finally and get it done privately because the pain was too much. This is a really raw subject for doctors, nurses, patients, and anyone who touches the NHS. So no, I don't blame people for feeling that way.
Good stuff. Well, look, both of you, sorry to leave you waiting, Dr. Ken, but we're going to have to go to the headlines, I'm afraid. But thank you very much for sticking around anyway. It was Dr. Ken Aswani there and Dr. Mike Smith as well. Really enjoyed that. Thank you, both of you, for coming on the show. Loads still to come here in the final half hour of To The Point. After the break, yesterday, the government were after our cigarettes. That's right. My cold, dead hands, anyway. Today, they're after our energy drinks. Could under-16s in Wales be banned from buying things like Monster and Red Bull? Find out after this morning's news.
It's coming up to 11:32. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. Some breaking news this hour. The Home Office has cancelled deportation orders for 3 people who challenged the government's policy to send asylum seekers to Rwanda. Our national reporter, Paul Hawkins, is at the High Court. Paul, what have you been hearing?
Well, at the moment, both sides are setting out their cases. The campaign groups The human rights campaign groups plus the union are basically giving their submissions as to why they think this adjudication should be brought to stop these 4 asylum seekers being deported to Rwanda. We do know that, that the Home Office have admitted that 3 of those 4 asylum seekers will not be sent to Rwanda. Let me just read you the words from their lawyer, Matthew Gulick, who said the defendant submits that no order for interim relief should be made either at the individual level to prevent the removal of the first claimant or at the wider level sought by the claimants, i.e. to prevent the removal of any asylum seeker to Rwanda who has not provided informed consent. Neither such order is justified. So the Home Office seems to be admitting there, my interpretation of that is they are admitting that 3 of the 4 asylum seekers have not provided informed consent, and so for now they are not one of what we have learned is around 100 asylum seekers that have been told that they will be deported to Rwanda. Now we've also heard from the lawyer Raza Hussein, who is representing the claimants. He has said the Secretary of State's conclusion as to the safety of Rwanda was irrational. We have a strong case for that. He said that a Home Office document used by the department in the claim was replete with the suggestion that the UNHCR, that's the UN's refugee agency, has given this plan a green light. Regrettably, the material in this application demonstrates that to be misleading, because he says the UN's refugee agency has not given its support to this plan. And indeed, the main thrust of their argument is that the Home Office's plan to deport asylum seekers and economic migrants to Rwanda is both unlawful and unsafe. They're continuing to thrash out their arguments in there, and then we may get a decision from the High Court today. Remember, that flight is due to leave on Tuesday.
Paul, thank you. Paul Hawkins, our national reporter outside the High Court for us. TV online and DAB Plus radio. This is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound is 1.245 to the dollar and 1.174 to the euro. And the price of gold currently stands at £1,480 and 43 pence per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Yes, good morning, everybody. It's 11:37. This is To The Point with me, Patrick Christie's, right here on GB News. And yes, you know the drill now. We're live on your TV, online and radio this morning. Well, Energy drinks, OK? Well, apparently selling them to under 16s could be banned in Wales in a bid to tackle childhood obesity. So more than 1 in 4 children are overweight when they start primary school, according to official figures. Under Welsh Government proposals, takeaways could also be stopped from opening near schools, and free soft drink refills could be banned. Well, the consultants are said to be aimed basically at informing new legislation to try to improve the health of young people. Yeah. But obviously some people are saying this is basically a dictatorship. Julian Jessup, independent economist and fellow at the IEA, joins me now. Thank you very, very much. Look, I mean, is this the kind of creeping, asphyxiating hand of the state into our lives?
Well, frankly, I think it is, yes. I think most people are comfortable with the idea that there are certain things that you shouldn't be able to sell to young people. So I wouldn't want a 10-year-old to be able to, go and buy fireworks or vodka or cigarettes. But there has to be a line drawn somewhere. And I think banning energy drinks is the wrong side of that line. It's not proportionate to the risks involved. Most young people get, far more sugar from other things, far more caffeine from drinking, tea, coffee and Coke and so on. So the evidence that people are getting a lot of sugar or caffeine from these energy products is pretty limited. On top of that, you've got to consider all the hassle involved for retailers in enforcing this. And finally, will it even work? I did a straw poll of teenagers on the school run this morning, and one overwhelming feeling I got back was that the one way to make something more popular is to ban it. Then it becomes cooler.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think if you did restrict the sale of these things, people just want them more.
No, exactly that. But I think for me, it's just a bit of a wider point, isn't it, really? I think it's almost quite offensive, I find this, to humans, really, because the idea that we're not capable of making our own decisions. Now, I understand, OK, kids, OK, the argument might be that children don't really necessarily know what they're doing. Well, just tell them, just say to them, energy drinks are not particularly great for you. There are certain health connotations that are not particularly positive. And then if they want to have it, they can have it. I mean, I'm worried about where does this end? Do we get banned from doing absolutely anything that the state doesn't want us to do?
Well, I agree with that. I think that applies to lots of products. In many ways, young people at the moment are what's sometimes called generation sensible. And I know lots of parents may disagree with that. But, people are now well aware of the risks, for example, of smoking. If they want to continue to do it, then, that's their choice. I don't think they should be banned or restricted in disproportionate ways from doing that. I mean, people know that, sugary drinks are bad for you. But why then ban sugary drinks, but still allow people to go into your local newsagent and buy 5 pounds of jelly babies if you want to? That it doesn't make sense. There isn't a strong evidence base for this. I think it's just people trying to make a point. We have been through a pandemic where health officials have had enormous amounts of power. I think this is just a stretch too far.
Yeah, and you've hit the nail on the head there. So I presumably, as a 15-year-old in Wales, if this all goes through, would not be able to go in and buy a can of Red Bull, but I could buy my entire weight in sweets and eat them right outside. I mean, that doesn't seem to make too much sense for me. And we did a thing yesterday about whether or not to raise the age of consent, I suppose, is it? Or the age of being able to buy, anyway, cigarettes to 21. And there's a lot of this going around at the minute. And I just don't think it's really particularly great for people, really. I think, we need to have the freedom of choice. And that's my concern. Now, talking as well about the other elements of this, if you are just joining us, that they might ban things like fast food shops opening up near schools. Well, I mean, can we really be doing this? I mean, just, it's a business, for goodness sake. What do we end up with? Just a load of, just a load of houses instead of a fast food shop or something? I'm not sure.
Yeah, exactly. It makes me feel really uncomfortable as well. I think in particular, it seems to be an alternative to other solutions, promoting healthy diets by education, for example, or, giving kids more opportunities to exercise, because, of course, being overweight is not just about what goes in, it's also what you burn out in terms of calories expended. And I think there are far, far better ways to tackle the obesity problem than picking on just one or two items. I mean, if I were to make a list of things to ban, then energy drinks would be way down the list. Why pick on them?
Well, I mean, but I'm not being...
that people can consume.
Yeah, I'm not being funny, but I mean, I think for me, I'd be more concerned about kids carrying knives or dealing drugs than I would be about whether or not he's got a can of Monster in his hand.
Well, yeah, hopefully, of course, it's not a question of either or, but I liked your example of somebody being able to go into a sweet shop and buy their own weight in jelly babies. And on top of that, of course, when they step out, they can, wash that down with a triple espresso from their local coffee shop or a huge can of non-diet Coke or whatever it might be. It really doesn't make any sense. It's sort of nibbling at the edges. But worse than that, I often think that the slippery slope argument is overdone. But this is continuous, isn't it? They're constantly finding things that actually people enjoy. I mean, I quite like the occasional energy drink, and I'm able to burn it off quite satisfactorily. Maybe some teenagers do want extra energy for whatever reason. I mean, they're growing, they're full of beans, and maybe an energy drink is a good solution for them.
Yeah, I mean, my weight in jelly babies followed by a triple espresso. You've accurately described my breakfast there, so thank you very much for telling the nation all about that. But there's a wider point here, isn't there, I think? Certainly, actually, in Wales, it does seem to be quite a big issue, actually, which is state control of things. And kind of, what would you say? Kind of like they feel like they have to be our mothers, really. The nanny state, really, right? So kind of writ large here with things like this. So where did this lot get off? Because they're not being funny, but I'm not convinced, and, don't need to go into too much detail about this, but I'm not convinced that Mark Drakeford is exactly the kind of guy that I believe should necessarily be telling me how to run my own home.
Well, I think that's a fair point. The way that I look at this is that you can't always rely on the government to make these decisions for you. And the more that the state takes responsibility for deciding what individuals should eat, the less responsibility that people themselves take. It's far better to inform people of what the risks are and to let them make up their own minds than to assume that if something is not banned, it must be okay because it's not banned. Whereas, in fact, if you found out more information, you might decide to change what you're spending your money on, what you're consuming. And it should therefore be driven by, well-informed consumers making choices rather than bureaucrats, whether that's in London or Edinburgh or in Cardiff, making those decisions for you.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. Look, thank you very, very much. Great to have you back on the show again, of course, Julian. Good stuff. Julian Jessop there, of course. Independent economist and also a fellow at the IEA as well. Just discussing basically these things about, potentially in Wales anyway, they're going to ban energy drinks for kids, I suppose, stop takeaways from opening up near schools, free soft drink refills could be banned. I mean, I just think it's a little bit much, really. Surely you would have thought that they'd actually have a lot better on more pressing matters anyway, potentially. Some views already coming in on this, actually. People say in Wales they want you to vote at 16, but they'll ban you from having an energy drink. And he says, typical Labour mentality. And that's from Lisa. Sorry, it's not a he, it's a she. It's Louise. Thank you very much, Louise, for getting in touch with all of that. Loads of you getting in touch. The Rwanda deal, OK? So, in case you were just joining us, I imagine there'll be a lot more on this throughout the day, certainly in our bulletins as well. But I was handed a sheet of paper earlier on, which appears, as far as I can see, just from reading it anyway, it appears to say that essentially we may well need someone's consent to send them to Rwanda now, which, if true, I imagine there'll be a lot more developing on this. It's just drop this. But if that is true, then obviously that kind of defeats the point of the whole deal, doesn't it? And a lot of you are very angry about this. GBViews, GBnews.uk. Who are these lawyers and so-called charity organisations? The situation is an absolute disgrace, and that's from Terry. He put a word before disgrace there, which I'm not allowed to read out on the news, but thank you very much, Terry. The NHS. Jim's been on touch. Loving the show today, Patrick. Cheers, Jim. Says, can we not find out who ordered this PPE? This is the story that we're going to, I think, burn, basically, billions of pounds worth of unusable PPE, and make them pay for it or return it to whoever supplied them. Well, I imagine, Jim, that most of it came from China. So good luck telling Xi Jinping that he has to pay for his PPE back. But anyway, there we go. Let's take you through some of the headlines of the day that you may have missed. I think, to be fair, it's probably my favourite bit of the show, this. Thousands of travellers from across Europe have begun to arrive in Cumbria as the Appleby Horse Fair gets underway, with locals closing a school, shutting pubs, and obviously the festival is starting. Well, the police say that they've made arrests for theft and drug driving and being called to the scene of a crash where a horse died and 3 people were injured before the fair even started. So a total of 30,000 visitors. I mean, look, everyone knows it's a festival for travellers, isn't it? There we go. So a total of 30,000 visitors, or indeed travellers, are expected to congregate in the small town of Appleby in Westmoreland and neighbouring Kirby Stephen for the annual 4-day event. I used to live up there, actually, and the Appleby Horse Fair was it's quite a good day out, but not if you're a local, I imagine, anyway. If you've ever woken up after a heavy night of drinking with the fear that you've done something embarrassing you can't quite remember, then you're not alone. That's right. Women from across the UK have taken to Mumsnet to share their most mortifying drunken mistakes, including buying a van on eBay, vomiting on their neighbour's car, and pulling some very inappropriate moves while dancing with their father-in-law. So one person even admitted that they recently took their trousers off in their friend's living room mid-party as they decided to go to bed there and then. So apparently their friend did manage to see the funny side. Yes, I'm sure. I don't know about you, ladies and gentlemen. I have quite bad beer fear. So the day after, I always wake up and you think, oh, what have I done? Usually you've done nothing, really. But you wake up and you just think, riddled with self-doubt. What have I done? What have I done wrong? But anyway, the remains of Europe's largest ever predatory dinosaur have been discovered on the Isle of Wight. So bones of the... Oh, here we go. Spinosaurid, I think. Spinosaurid... Yeah, that'll do. Spinosaurid dinosaur were identified by researchers from the University of Southampton. So the Spinosaurid was a two-legged, fierce, crocodile-faced predator, more than 10 metres long and several tonnes in weight. So about the length of a typical double-decker bus. I like the fact that in this country, we always have this big debate, don't we, about should we go back to the metric system? Should we do stones? The way that we always describe how much something weighs is we compare it to a double-decker bus. That's what we always do. We go, oh, it's about half a bus, that. Oh, it's about the size of 2 buses. Football fields as well. We always do that, don't we? How big is that? Well, it's about the size of 15 football fields. Yeah, I don't know why we do that. Anyway, a one-armed cleaner, moving on, who was pushed aside by council bosses, has been declared as one of the best cleaners in Britain. Good stuff. 47-year-old Daniel Jeffrey lost his right arm in a motorcycle crash. I don't think that's Daniel Jeffrey on the TV screen now. It might be Danielle Jeffrey, to be fair. But anyway, there we go. Lost his right arm in a motorcycle crash 23 years ago and has amazed people with his sparkling cleans with just one arm. Good stuff, mate. I think that's fantastic. What a success story. In fact, I do a National Treasure feature on Friday night. So, yes, cheeky little plug this evening, Friday Night Feast, 7 until 9 p.m. I will be live, out and about for you, so make sure you tune into that. But anyway, we do a National Treasure section on that show. Maybe Daniel could be a National Treasure. But anyway, managers said that his work was substandard despite Daniel coming third in a national contest of 4,000 cleaners, despite his disability. So they fired him from his contract, apparently. Well, anyway, now the married dad of 3 has demanded an apology. Good for you, Daniel, I think. Yes, you're obviously doing a cracking job, and well done you. I think I'll give you a shout-out here. Now, I don't know if anyone else saw this story earlier on. It's wild, right? So Britney Spears married her fiancé Sam Asghari in a surprise nuptials at a £7.4 million California mansion yesterday. Obviously, we all know that Britney's been through the ringer a little bit recently, hasn't she, to say the least. But it wasn't all roses at the wedding, no. Actually, there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pink roses, but the celebrations were crashed by her first husband, Jason Alexander, right? So, who live-streamed it, by the way. He actually live-streamed this on Instagram. So, luckily, Spears and the new Mr. Spears, has he taken her name? Anyway, there we go, were able to flee before Jason was able to get to them. Well, that sounds a bit threatening. The 40-year-old apparently scaled a fence, descended down a rocky hillside and slipped into the wedding marquee just hours before the wedding ceremony was supposed to take place. I mean, tell me that you're not over your missus without telling me that you're not over your missus. But anyway, there we go. Anyway, right, OK, so it's my pleasure, actually, now, to introduce my next guest, Amos Yadlin, Senior Fellow, Middle East Initiative at the Harvard Kennedy School, former head of Israeli military intelligence. So, thank you very, very much for joining us on the show. Real pleasure to have you on, Amos. You're one of 8 pilots. By the way, this is a really, really fascinating story, this, and you've had an incredible life, right? And that's really why I want to talk to you, actually. So Amos was one of 8 pilots sent to bomb the Osirak nuclear reactor in Iraq on the 7th of June 1981, and was also involved in the destruction of Syria's secretly constructed nuclear reactor in Al-Kibar. So, look, welcome, fantastic stuff. So, I mean, this is tremendous to have you on the show. I mean, I've got a few questions here that are on my auto key, but I don't really want to ask them. I want to ask you what it feels like to bomb a nuclear reactor.
It's a unique mission. You know, we are fighter pilot. What we want to do is to shoot enemy airplanes and to be ace in dogfights. However, this is air-to-mud mission that tactically was not that important to us. But strategically, when you look at it from a perspective of 41 years, it's established a strategic doctrine, which is saying if a dictator with nuclear weapon will be with the capability to destroy Israel, And this dictator is calling to destroy Israel. And look what Putin is doing, because he has a nuclear weapon. So Israel will not allow such a dictator to have a nuclear weapon. And as you say, I was involved as a fighter pilot in 81 and as chief of intelligence in 2007 in terminating 2 nuclear programs, nuclear weapon programs.
Yeah. So clearly that must have, well, by definition, it was a very secret operation. So, I mean, I don't know what you're allowed to tell me, really, but I mean, what's the procedure in terms of you being told that you're going to do this, being given your instructions, really? I'm, of course, quite keen to see how that actually happens. Does someone just tap you on the shoulder one day and say, don't tell anyone about this, but we need you now?
No, we just brought the brand new F-16 from the United States. We are a group of 12 people, 12 pilots that were trained on this brand new airplane. And when we landed in Israel, we were told that we are now training to a unique mission. They haven't told us what is the mission. They haven't told us what is the target. Only they try to tell us, can you make a 600 nautical mile mission into an enemy well-defended area? And remember, at that time, Iraq and Iran were in a war, and we don't have air refueling at that time. We don't have GPS navigation. We don't have satellites that will give us good intelligence. So we trained to generic target. Only 3 days before the attack, we were told what is the target.
Wow. I mean, that's incredible. I mean, really is incredible. And the thing is as well, I think, look, there's obviously, and we're not going to get stuck into it now, there's obviously a huge debate about the Israel-Palestine situation. I mean, I think the phrase huge debate is putting it mildly, to be fair. But I don't think a lot of people really realise what it must be like to be Israeli. I mean, you are surrounded by enemies, basically, and at times those enemies have tried to come together to wipe you off the face of the map, haven't they?
Yes, we are a small country to a very old nation. That after 2,000 years, we again found our old forefatherland. We want to live with peace with our neighbors. They haven't want to have peace. But the good news are that the Arabs around us, Egypt, Jordan, UAE, Bahrain, maybe in the very soon the Saudis, are come to the realization that peace with Israel will bring them much more peace dividends than any war can bring them. So there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and the light is peace with our Arab neighbors. We don't have time, but we have another enemy far away, which called Iran, another nuclear program that somebody younger than me will have to terminate.
Look, Amos, thank you so much. I'm very, very sorry that we've kind of run out of time, but I'd just like to say to you and just ask you, really, if we could get you back on at some point, or maybe I could do a bit of a longer form interview with you, maybe for our YouTube channel or something like that, because you're a fascinating chap, and I'd love to speak to you a lot more. But thank you very much. Amos Yadlin there, of course, Senior Fellow, Middle East Initiative at the Harvard Kennedy School, former head of Israeli military intelligence. I mean, I could have spoken to that guy all day, actually, but anyway, there we go. Well, look, thank you very much, everyone who's been tuning in. I'll be back later for Friday Night Feast. It's a good one, so you're going to enjoy this week's challenge, ladies and gentlemen. Let me just make that very, very clear from the outset. I'm on 7 until 9 p.m. this evening, Friday Night Feast. Thank you, everyone who's been getting in touch. And, yes, I'll see you all later. But now it's your weather.
Hi there, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. It's a bright Friday for many of us with some decent sunny spells, particularly in the south, but it will be windy, particularly in the north, with showers affecting much of Scotland and Northern Ireland. That's because low pressure is approaching this low unseasonably deep for early June. It's brought a weather front across the UK, but that didn't bring much rain. And now we're in the showery, windy airflow that circulates the low. As a result, well, it's really Western Scotland and Northern Ireland that bear the brunt of the strongest winds and the heaviest showers, some hail and thunder mixed in with the downpours, and the risk of coastal gales for exposed parts of Western Scotland. Feeling cool here, but elsewhere, actually very few showers, sunny spells, and although breezy, it will be warm in the east. Eastern Scotland, 20 Celsius, Eastern England, 23 to 24. Overnight, the showers continue across much of Scotland. In fact, some more persistent rain coming along later on. And there'll be showers trickling into northern and western England as well as Wales. But elsewhere, clear spells and perhaps a few shallow mist and fog patches forming in the south of England by dawn. A mild night for many, although in some sheltered spots temperatures will dip into the single figures. A bright start then, once again, for much of England and Wales, southern and eastern Scotland. But for Northern Ireland, for much of Scotland, once again, showers or longer spells of rain and that strong wind continuing. A breezy day for many and a few more showers, I think, compared to Friday for western England as well as for Wales.
Thank you.
But away from the showers, decent sunny spells. And again, high teens in the west and the north, mid to low 20s. In the south and the east.
Good.
Saturday evening brings further outbreaks of rain for central and western Scotland, showers for northern England, western parts of Wales. But then Sunday looks a bit quieter, less windy, still some showers, but fewer
2,
and
3,
less heavy.
4, 5, 6, 7.
Where would you like to go?
Stay to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world.